Welcome back into Cherry Picking, Week 5 of the NHL Fantasy Hockey season. Another episode of Must Add and Must Drop. Joined again by Steven Psihogios, digital producer over at NorthStar Bets, former Yahoo Fantasy Hockey expert. So, Steve, last week we had some Must Add and Must Drop, and your picks did pretty well. So, why don't you talk about Mangiapane and Adin Hill and their performances last week?
So Mangiapane, that was one I thought I was going to be dead wrong about because when I gave out the pick, he was still on the second line. And then as soon as the episode dropped, he got bumped up to line one. I'm like, are you kidding me? Of course, that's how it works. But he has not done much of anything since being bumped up. The Flames, again, they lose another game where they're leading by multiple goals last night. Things aren't going well in Calgary. So I'm just steering clear of that team until they figure it out. For Adin Hill, at least, you know what? He got a win. It wasn't a beautiful performance. It wasn't a masterpiece by any stretch of the imagination, but he got the win. I'm still not worried because that Vegas defense is really good. He also, I thought things were going to go south with that pick too, because Brossoit got designated for assignment like right after the episode dropped. I'm like, really? Mangiapane gets bumped up to line one. Brossoit's coming back. But at this point, you have to think about it. Brossoit might not get a spot in this net if both these guys play well. It's not like he's some established, long-term starter in the NHL. He's been a journeyman, so he might not have a spot in this crease when he gets back.
Yeah, I totally agree. I don't really see Adin Hill. He's 5-0, I think, right? Like I don't know how you can pull that guy out and either put him in the minors or do whatever they would do with him. And then Mangiapane on the other side, I totally agree. Like because right as we posted that video, all the comments were, well, Mangiapane just moved up to the first line. Like, I wouldn't drop him. And he didn't have a single point last week. And I think he was -5. So he's obviously, like you mentioned in the video last week, we've been waiting for this guy to regress a little bit. And I think we've kind of found that pocket. But let's get into the picks this week. Who's your must add on the fantasy waiver wire?
I wanted to go defenseman theme this week, especially because there was one guy I really wanted to drop on defense who you actually had. We both submitted our picks together and you had the guy I wanted, but I feel like it's only fair because defense is such a hard position to facilitate in fantasy hockey. So the player I'm recommending you add is Vince Dunn, who's rostered in 36% of Yahoo leagues. If you like defensemen quarterbacking top 10 power plays in the NHL, Vince Dunn is your guy. The Kraken ranked 9th in the NHL in power play percentage this year, 26.1%. So you've got this guy, he's playing on this above league average power play, and he's been pretty good. He's tied for 22nd with 3 power play points this year. He's got 2 goals, 6 assists. Dunn has been just fine. He's not going to get bumped off that power play anytime soon, I don't think, and it's a good unit. So Vince Dunn to me is a player that you want to add. He's also got 6 points in his last 7 games, so he's been producing as of late.
Yeah, Vince Dunn was a guy I kind of had on my radar before the season. A little bit of a slow start this season, but now as this Seattle team has really, they've been a much better team this year as a unit. This group's really starting to play well together. You mentioned how good their power play has been, and Vince Dunn is kind of the head of all that. As you mentioned, quarterbacking that power play. He's an offensive defenseman. I have no problem with this pick, and especially at 36%, that's a little surprising. I'm sure people were maybe dropping him early at the beginning of the year just with how slow his start was, but right now he is definitely a must-add. I'm going a little bit different direction. Last week I had Caleb Jones, who's been solid with Seth Jones out. I'm going with a forward this week on the New Jersey Devils, and it's Miles Wood. There's a lot of mouths to feed on this New Jersey team, but they're producing so many scoring chances that I think Miles Wood is still valuable of a roster spot on a lot of teams right now. He's only rostered in 9% of leagues. So the one concerning thing with Miles Wood, he has a pretty low possible share of ice time and doesn't play a ton of minutes right now. He's on the 4th, 3rd line with some of those grittier guys like Bastian on the team. But he has been playing really well. And I think Lindy Ruff is being smart with Miles Wood because last year he had hip surgery. Maybe he's kind of continuing to work him in, and we're seeing him produce in the last 8 or his last 6 games. Like, he has 8 points on the season, 6 of them coming in the last 8 games or so. And if you look at his numbers too, he's currently second on the team in points per 60 minutes, and he has an expected goals rate of 1.46, which is solid, and his shooting percentage is 13%. So that's not something that's out of control. It's something very sustainable for a guy on this team that's generating a lot of scoring chances. He's 3rd on the team in shots on goal with 38, and he has the 2nd most high danger chances. So he's putting himself in the best spots to succeed. He's on that 2nd power play. If you have a winger that's underperforming right now, there's a guy I suggested to pick up I think it was week 2 of the fantasy season, was Danton Heinen. That was before Gensel got back. He's really done nothing since getting moved off that Crosby line. So he's definitely someone you could sub out for Miles Wood. But regardless, if you have just any forward that's underperforming, Miles Wood is a really valuable pickup in my mind.
I like that call. You just want as many pieces of this Devils offense right now as possible. They're just scoring goals at will. It's a great offense to have pieces of. You look at how they're performing high danger chances. Why is this team? They lead the league. Like they're one of the best teams at generating quality looks. So New Jersey, not a bad team to target right now if you're looking for pieces in fantasy hockey.
Absolutely. And I think the one thing too with Wood, he's very physical. I wouldn't say he's a stat sheet stuffer, but he gets a lot of hits. He blocks shots for sure. He's pretty much valuable in all aspects of the game, a player that Lindy Ruff really likes. So Miles Wood for me to pick up this week. But Steve, who's a guy that you're getting off your roster this week, a guy you want to tell people to drop?
So this isn't someone, I'm not saying in every league you should drop this player, but he's certainly rostered in more leagues than he should be. That's Bowen Byram at 75%. I couldn't believe how high the number was for Byram. This whole Avalanche team has not performed as well as people thought they were going to this year. They're 21st in the league in high danger chances. It turns out center depth matters. Like losing Nazem Kadri has caused a ripple effect of this offense. It's very concentrated amongst the top scorers. And with Byram, what is the upside there? You're never going to get him on that top power play unit. That is locked in for Makar. And the issue we come back to with Byram is durability. It's been an issue his entire career. And your best ability is your availability. So Byram is he's this mix of durability concerns, mix of lack of opportunity. And the Avalanche just be worse than we expected them to be this year so far offensively. I just don't think he should be rostered in 75% of Yahoo leagues.
Yeah, I'm in agreement with you there. I think the fact that Avalanche's offense has taken a little bit of a turn here, it's tough to see Byram to say that Byram will pick up his production at this point. There's a ton of defensemen usually on your waiver wire. Steve just mentioned one in Vince Dunn. The Seattle team as well. There's a guy I was looking at to maybe put in this video, Jamie Alexiak. He's been surprisingly really good in the offensive end. But you mentioned it too, lack of opportunity. These guys on Seattle have a ton of opportunity because there's not a ton of depth there, especially in terms of offensive defensemen. So I'm totally in agreement with you on that one. And I actually have a defenseman to drop as well. Steve alluded to it at the beginning of the video, but this guy has to be dropped, I think, in pretty much all leagues. 64% rostered in Yahoo leagues, 80% in ESPN leagues. That's crazy, and that's Jeff Petry on the Pittsburgh Penguins. He would have been a great sell high piece at the beginning of the year because he had a pretty solid start. 4 points in 4 games with a goal, but he doesn't have a single point since 8 straight games without a point. For a guy that used to be known as an offensive defenseman, he's really started to regress. Watching and being a Canadiens fan last year, you kind of started to notice it. He was also just didn't seem like he wanted to be a part of that team anymore. He obviously, later on in his career, he wants to be a part of a cup contender. It seemed like Pittsburgh was trending in that direction, but recently their defense has really just been abysmal. And you're looking at his offensive point production. His points per 60 minutes is below 1, which is second worst on his team. And his shot volume is really, really low, lower than we've ever seen it. He has just 4 shots on goal in his last 5 games and 0 high danger chances this entire year. We've seen, with guys like Letang, maybe not Dumoulin, but even with John Marino leaving, there was maybe a vacant spot for Petry to fill in there as this offensive guy who kind of can do it all. He hasn't really done that. There are much better pieces, as I mentioned when Steve was talking about. Not Vince Dunn. Not Vince Dunn, but Bowen Byram that you could pick up on the waiver wire. There's tons of other guys. So Petry is definitely someone that I'm looking to drop.
Yeah, the Penguins, they've just really taken a big nosedive, and he hasn't done anything to help them over this losing streak. Like you said, he's been one of their worst players in the offensive zone, and the opportunity's not going to be there. Letang's not going anywhere on power play 1. So what's the upside? That's what you have to ask yourself in fantasy hockey. What's the upside with this player? If they're not getting those big, juicy minutes and those plump opportunities, it's hard to justify keeping them on your roster when they're not performing.
Totally agree. Lack of opportunity, as you mentioned, you got to make sure that's the tipping point for when you're looking guys to pick up, not even defensemen, but forwards as well. Obviously, goalies too. One guy that's still very available, a guy I talked about last week, Caleb Jones. He had a couple assists this week. Until Seth Jones comes back, he's going to be on that power play 1 and very viable, just playing a ton more minutes. So those are 2 guys to add and 2 guys to drop for NHL Fantasy Hockey for Week 5. Steve, thanks again for joining. Thank you guys all for watching. Be sure to like, comment, subscribe. Join the Discord if you have any other questions, and I'll see you guys next time.